Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You're welcome to be seated. As Rabbi Ern mentioned, it is easy to find because today we are beginning the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy. And what I want to do this morning, actually, is a little bit of what we would call parshanut. I want to have all of us sort of play the role of rabbinic interpreters and try to understand one of the verses. Actually, not even an entire verse. We're only going to look at 8 words. 8 words. And we're going to look at them in depth. So these 8 words are, in fact, the first 8 words in the book of Deuteronomy. Let's turn to page 981. Because what I'm going to argue today is that these seemingly innocuous 8 words that begin the book of Deuteronomy, begin the book of Devarim, actually come to teach us a great deal. Let's look at them. Ele hadvarim asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael. That's all I want to look at, those words. Ele hadvarim. These are the words, these are the things, right? A davar can be a word or a thing in Hebrew, but it's pretty clear here. We're talking about the words. These are, in fact, the words. Asher diber Moshe, that Moses spoke, el kol Yisrael, to all of Israel. That is the introduction to the book of Deuteronomy. So we're going to take this phrase by phrase and try to understand what does it mean. All right? Let's start with the first 2 words. Ele hadvarim, right? These are the words. So let's put ourselves into the mind of the rabbinic interpreter, and what might stand out to us, what might we learn from these first 2 words? Please, Mark, welcome back, first of all.
Thank you. So normally, what we see at the beginning of each Parsha is, and God spoke to Moses.
Mm-hmm.
But here, it gives Moses the ownership of the word.
Okay, so you're actually looking at the second group of words, which I think is important, but I agree with what you're saying, right? Asher diber Moshe. The speaker here is Moses, not God.
Well, but the point is, right from the beginning, it says, these are the words of Moses. So it's not the word of God, it is the word of Moses. So actually, I was interested in the first 2.
Well, yes and no, because that asher, the word asher in there kind of splits those phrases a little bit. Right? So, yes, intuitively, these are the words of Moses, but it doesn't have to mean that. What it does say is Moses is the speaker here. He is the primary speaker, as opposed to, as you correctly stated, in most other sections of our Torah, not all, but many, God is the primary speaker, right? God spoke to Moses. God spoke to Aaron, saying, right? So we see here in these first 8 words a noticeable lack of, well, I'm going to say this more powerfully than I think I want, a noticeable lack of God. That's not what it means, right? But we don't see God as being the motivator here, as being the speaker here, and that is very notable. Seth? Yes, right? It's not the action that we focus on. It's the words that we're focusing on. These are the words. This word ele is not rare, but unusual, right? Unusual. And actually, the rabbis pick up on that and try to explain how the word ele here is used. But clearly, these words, now, that sort of begs the question, what are we talking about? Right? Right. Yeah. Right. Good. Good. So the Hebrew word devarim is much more nuanced, much richer than the English word words, right? And so just that translation, and that's why sometimes you'll see the translation, these are the things. But so there's a layer of nuance. And then you added to that, which I think are really important, is the power of words within Jewish tradition is something that we shouldn't take for granted, right? When we say these are words, and we highlight words, words have incredible power. Words create the universe. Words create the world around us. So these are the words, these are the important words. Wow, this is something we better pay attention to. We still haven't identified exactly what they are yet, but it's something that we need to pay attention to. Yes?
Well, I know we're only supposed to look at the first 8 words.
Uh-huh.
I would like to backtrack and go to the very end of Bamidbar, page 967. And here we have Elah HaDevarim, and I was just comparing these two. On 967, verse 13, Numbers ends with Elah HaMitzvot VeHaMishpatim.
Right.
So these are the mitzvot, the commandments, and the mishpatim, not the chukim, like the ones that make sense. Like they gave an example above of the daughters of Zelophehad, Asher Tzivah Hashem b'yad Moshe, that God commanded at the hand of Moshe. So now there's this connection between Moses and God. El Bnei Israel, specifically to and where Ba'arvot Moab Yarden Yerechel, in the Moab by the Jordan, Yarden, the Jordan, I guess, river, Yarden. And when we continue past these 8 words, he's still there.
Right.
So we go, Elah, now these are the words. These are the big words.
So you hit, Diana is just so I can make sure everybody can hear, is that there is Elah at the end of the book of Numbers, and Elah here. Diana's arguing that perhaps there's a connection, especially since they're still in that same locale. You actually hit on an interesting argument that the Parshanim, that the rabbis are very deep into. Some of them argue exactly as you do. Some of them actually argue the opposite, that says Elah means this is a completely different subject and a completely different thing, and you shouldn't, like Dafka, they say you shouldn't look back to that. And they're back and forth in terms of whether there's a connection here or not a connection here. It seems to me like you know, at least the way that this Torah is put together, it flows nicely from the end of one book into the beginning of the next book. But there are some rabbis who say, hold on, I can look and see. I was looking at, I've got all these different parshanim that are here. I can't remember who was the one that said it. Oh yeah, it's Chizkuni. Wherever a paragraph is introduced with the word Elah, it is not to be considered as a continuation of what preceded it. Right? So he argues the opposite, but that's the beauty of the rabbis. We can argue both of these things. Good. All right. Let me ask the question differently. What are the words? Yes.
Just thinking, the difference between Devarim and the technical word for words like Yidim or something is that it's not just the word,
For sure. So then what are the things? What are the ideas? What is Moses relating here? What are our possibilities? Yeah.
Well, I think when you continue past those 8 words, he's giving them an instruction manual.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of like maybe the introductory paragraph. So these are the words. Now, here's where they are. Here's what's about to happen. Folks, you're going, we just defeated Sihon and Og, and we're going forward now. And we got to know what to do. And
Yeah.
this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it could be these words that are about to follow, right? And that follows the interpretive line of Ramban, right? Ramban Nachmanides, not Maimonides, but Nachmanides, says this is in reference to all the mitzvot that we're about to get the recapitulation of by Moses in Devarim. Right? To me, this is sort of the pshat. This is the basic level. It makes the most sense. These words that now follow, right, in the book of Deuteronomy are what Moses spoke. And, by the way, our tradition is that this, in fact, is what Moses spoke. This book of Deuteronomy is really almost a soliloquy by Moses as the children of Israel are getting ready to go into the land of Israel. Right? So the first layer of understanding this, a la Ramban, is these mitzvot. These mitzvot. Okay. But some of the rabbis come at this very differently. So Rashi, for example, looks at this very differently. He looks at the rest of the verse. Right? These words. So the rest of the verse is, on the other side of Jordan, through the wilderness, in the Arava, near Suf, between Paran and Tofel, Lavan, Chatzerot, and Dizahav. So Rashi is trying to understand why those words are there. And he comes with an interesting interpretation. And he says, because the following words that are going to happen in the book of Deuteronomy are words of tochecha, reproof, right? He is enumerating here all the places where they provoked God to anger. So these words, these places, are places that we messed up, right? Places that we provoked God to anger, and therefore, the entire beginning, this first verse, takes on this attitude of reproof, of chastisement, right? Of you had better be careful before you go into the land of Israel. You had better be careful. Remember these places where we messed up, and therefore pay attention to the rest of Deuteronomy that is now giving us the way to live our lives, right? So 2 very different interpretations, Ramban and Rashi, right? The last, just to show you that we can interpret this in a completely different way, the Midrash in Devarim Rabbah, right? The Midrash in Devarim Rabbah says, these are the words, and it says, halacha, it is permissible for a person to write a Torah, is it permissible for a Torah scroll to be written in any language? So, the Midrash takes us in a completely different direction. And the power of these words is these words and these words exactly, right? You can't interpret them, you can't change them, you can't write them in a different language. You need to write them exactly as they are, because these are the words that Moses said you have to do it. 3 completely different ways of understanding the phrase Ele Hadvarim. These are the words. All right, we can continue to talk about that for a long time, but I want to go to the next part. What about Asher Diber Moshe? We already sort of leaned into that a little bit, right? I agree, Mark, with what you were saying here, is normally God is the speaker, and here we see Moses now is the one who is writing this or saying this. Tom.
And to that, I will just say it's, when when it says God speaks to Moses, it always leads with God, and it's important because when God speaks, you listen. But here, Moses comes after the words, so it does seem that the words come first. Moses is sort of secondary because it's not about Moses the way it would be about God speaking as the most important source of words, right? It's the words themselves, and I would see Moses as just being sort of the person to tie it together.
Yeah, I agree with you, but also syntactically, I don't know how you could write that sentence differently. In English, you can. In Hebrew, I think that would be difficult to actually, I mean, you could say, right? I mean, I don't think you can switch that. Because you still need the subject to come first, right? This is what Moses said, right? You could, in English, you could say Moses spoke these words to the children of Israel, but I don't think that works syntactically in the Hebrew, right? You have to sort of frame it this way. Okay. What about El Kol Yisrael? What do we learn from El Kol Yisrael? Or what can we learn? Everybody, right? Everybody, meaning what? Meaning? Okay, I like that, right? That interpretation. Everybody forever, right? El Kol Yisrael. There's no time limit it's not all of Israel that was standing there, but everybody. This is for everybody. We here should be listening to these words in the same way that they should be listening to it. Good. What else can we learn from El Kol Yisrael? Yeah.
Well, at this point, there are, for lack of a better word, different hierarchies. Like there are the priests, there are the judges, and all of that, and they all have their own rules and approaches and respect. But in this case, it's like, no, you're all on an even playing field.
Excellent.
This is what.
Excellent. We have gone through and we've seen God speaking to particular people or groups of people throughout the Torah, whether it be families in the book of Genesis, whether it be Moses and Aaron, whether it be the priests, whether it be the Levites, right? There are groups of people that God is speaking to all the way through. And the book of Deuteronomy is the populist book, right? It is the one that is for everyone, at least according to this. There's not a single group that is highlighted in that way. And what we see is, while there are a few mitzvot that are done by Kohanim or Levi'im mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy, most of the way it's framed is really for everybody. It's really for the people, right? It's how we treat one another. It's how we set up a society. It's all of those sorts of things as we're going into the land of Israel. It's really for everyone. Good. Yes. What else?
It was also pointed out that this is the first time they say El Kol Yisrael and not Bnei Yisrael. That's what this.
Yeah.
That's what's pointed out here, and I think part of this, like we always, I harken back to like when we're in the book of Genesis and we talk about it's a story about growing up and maturing, and then we go into Exodus and we see that like Moses is starting to mature and God is starting to mature. And here, I think it's kind of like everybody's growing up. Like, you're not children anymore. Now we're adults, and we're going into it's preparing them for the next phase. Almost
Yeah, there's a wonderful midrash here on how sort of, the children of Israel have grown up into Israel. They're not the children of Israel anymore. We're now Israel, right? I like that. Anybody else? And otherwise I'm going to leave you with two different ideas that I have, but I just want to make sure. Anyone else? So as I read this, there are two interesting interpretations that sort of hit me, especially now and this week. First of all, the definite article, Devarim, the words, as opposed to El Devarim, these are words, right? Reminds me that sometimes there are words that need to be said in specific moments. That as we sort of go through our life, there are different words that are important to us. And maybe they shift, right? So when we're young, maybe the word that we need to hear is dream, right? When we're raising children, maybe the word that we need to hear is be present. When we are struggling with relationships that are difficult, maybe the word that we need to hear is forgive. There are particular words that are necessary for a particular moment. And I find a great deal of important power in the fact that the Torah is saying these words are important that Moses is saying right now for this moment in the development of our people, in what was going to happen next before the children of Israel go in. And I encourage us to think about what are the words that are important to us today. What are the words that might be important to us tomorrow? And be willing to change. Be willing to recognize that as we evolve and as we grow and as we go into and experience different moments in our lives, those words may change that we need to hear. But more often than not, there are words that we need to hear in any given moment. And if we can identify that, it gives us a great deal of strength and a great deal of power to move forward in an intentional sort of way. That's idea number one. Idea number two, El Kol Yisrael, to all of Israel. It's not just that everybody in Israel was there. It's not, to me, just a statement of who is present. But there is an invitation implicit in this as well. Moses is saying every Jew is invited into these words. Every Jew needs to be invited into these words. And this week especially, I think this has power as we are celebrating Pride, our Pride Parade that is going on today, right? To recognize the fact of this, everyone who chooses to be part of this community was there. These words are relevant to each and every one of us. And we shouldn't start making these distinctions, and we shouldn't start making these differentiations, because these words belong to every single Jew and every single one of us. So this Shabbat, I hope that we take these words to heart, as we're going to hear in the book of Devarim quite often, right? We take these words to heart, that A, there are words that are important for us to hear at different moments in our lives, and B, these words that we are sharing, that we are celebrating as Jews, are for all of us. And we should be welcoming to everyone who wants to learn and who wants to celebrate as a Jew. Shabbat Shalom.